Hi, I'm Janelle Shala, and this is the third of my introductory videos on crystal healing. I mentioned in the first video that the history of crystal healing goes back to the beginning of mankind. I want to give you an idea of just how tied in with our history crystals actually are and the use of them in healing. Now, the first evidence we have of crystals or minerals being used by man dates back 75,000 years to the Blombos caves in South Africa, where they found two examples of a mineral called limonite, which is actually known as ochre. Limonite is a clay that's full of iron, and they grind it up and use it as a pigment. But these examples from the Blombos cave have actually been carved, not very intricately, but there are lines in them that have formed a pattern, and archaeologists have dated it back to 75,000 years ago. So there has been an interaction between man and mineral for all this period of time. The next actual notable example is 7,000 years ago when amber, which isn't technically speaking a mineral, this is actually a tree resin, but amber was used as an amulet, which means it had been specifically carved and shaped and worn to be either protective or healing or something of that to that effect. We don't know because there's no historical evidence. We just know that they were worn, and probably in a ritual manner or probably in a way that was meant to be protective. So this is a really grotty or heavy-duty piece of amber that I have, really big chunky piece, not very pretty but very strong. This is probably more what you're used to seeing, the very clear amber that we tend to get in jewelry. The next historical evidence we have is in ancient Egypt, although there are other places in the world that we were getting writing about minerals at the same time. In ancient Egypt, they use a lot of minerals for pigments. For example, galena, which is a lead ore, was used as kohl around the eyes. So was lapis lazuli, but most importantly, malachite. Now, malachite is very interesting because it has naturobacteriostatic qualities, and apparently, according to the archaeologists, the ancient Egyptians were very prone towards eye infection. They would grind this up and they would use this as an eye decoration. Now, there's no definite proof. They wouldn't have known microbes were around in those days, so there's no definite proof that's why they were wearing it, but evidently they did notice that there was a difference, that people got fewer eye infections when they used powdered malachite around their eyes. There's an ancient Egyptian papyrus known as the Ebers papyrus that dates back to 1500 BC. It probably is a copy of one that's even older than that, and it mentions many minerals and many ways of using them for healing purposes, including ingesting. So they would grind them up to a powder and then they'd drink them with wine or with honey. A lot of our names and the ways we use minerals now have been based on ancient Greek. And for example, amethyst, the name amethyst comes from the Greek for not drunken, and they use this as an amulet against inebriation. We still use amethyst for people who have addiction problems, including alcoholism, so we have brought this through from 2,000 years ago in ancient Greece. They believed that quartz was a mineral that they actually believed it was water that had frozen so solidly that it would never defrost again. So our name for quartz comes from them as well, and that was their way of looking at it. Many of the things that were written about by Pliny the Elder were brought through right through to the Middle Ages. There are a number of books that were published or written as manuscripts during the medieval period that talk about how stones were used. These include one by Hildegard von Bingen, written in the 11th century, which she calls, it is part of her larger work called Physica. And she talks about a number of stones in that, how they're used. Her reasons for why they would work are very different from how we would see them, because she still believed that the world was formed over 7 days, in a period of 7 days. And her reasons for the way the crystals would work would depend on what time of the day and which day of the week it had been formed in. So Not quite the way we see it now, but still very valid. A lot of the things she wrote were the way we use crystals now. In the Middle Ages, they used to use malachite quite a lot for children. They would use it to protect children in the cradle, so often little amulets of malachite would be created and hung onto the cradle. They used stones like Peridot as a protection against evil spirits. And this is a polished piece of agate, but I'm hoping that you can see that agate forms in these little circular shapes. It was used quite a lot. They would take one of these and use it as a protection against the evil eye. So again, a protection amulet. Quite a lot was done then with protection. But some of the other ways we use crystals, making gem elixirs was used by Hildegard von Bingen. She also talks about laying on of stones, although she doesn't call it that. Now, I've only talked about Europe so far, but there is evidence all through, historically, all through the world of using crystals in healing. There were books written about it 3,500 years ago. The ancient Indians used quite a lot of crystals such as diamonds and rubies. They used all of these in healing and for other purposes. And in the Americas, the Native Americans were using crystals, especially things like turquoise and jade, for thousands of years.